Okay, so here we are with Pat Carlen, a sociologist who aligns with the feminist perspective. So, our first feminist in the crime unit. Now, Carlen is a really useful study. It sort of combines the idea of social class and gender as well, and obviously talking about crime. Now, I don't believe that Carlen aligns with sort of Marxist feminism, but I could be wrong with that one. For all intents and purposes, all you need to know is that she is a feminist and she did actual research. Okay, so she did actual research rather than just drawing on a theory. She actually went out and did some research to find out what she wanted to find out. Okay, and that's what we're going to hit to discuss here today. So, as you might have noticed, a slightly more modern study, so 1988, although I mean that's still a very long time ago. It's a bit more modern than, say, the Marxes and the Durkheims of sociology. So, worth bearing that in mind. Now, the stuff in blue. Hopefully, you've done this on your own case study sheet, but basically, this is the research method. Now, it's worth noting in your exam paper, you could get asked a research methods question to do with Carlin or any of the other case studies, for that matter, which actually have research within them, and there are a few of those. So it's worth at least putting on a flashcard or something what sort of method Carlin sort of used and who she studied. So you can see she studied mostly working class women between the ages of 15 and 46, so a fairly varied age bracket, who have been convicted of one or more crimes. So she did do unstructured interviews, which hopefully, with your research methods brains engaged, you'll know that they are highly qualitative. Okay, so gaining lots of detailed information. And she did those unstructured interviews in prisons with the women who had been convicted of those crimes. So it's a very topical sort of research method that she used. However, one of the problems with it was the fact that she only did it on a very small sample of 39 women. Now, that's a criticism. Okay. Now, it's an understandable one because she's doing very probably quite long conversations in these unstructured interviews with these 39 women. But all the same, what she uses from those interviews, the information that she gains, she is drawing quite a big theory from it. So you can argue that it's not necessarily a very representative piece of research, and so you have to take that into account when talking about this theory, is that actually it's based on quite a small sample. So is it relevant to everyone, every working class woman, sorry? Maybe not. Okay, so just when you're evaluating this theory, that's something that you can talk about. So, moving on to the actual theory itself. So, she talks about control theory, or at least uses control theory. And this is basically the idea that we as human beings we're not good, we're not bad, but we are rational. Okay, we can make our own decisions, weighing up the consequences with the potential outcome. So, like when you're thinking about crime, before someone commits a crime, let's say theft, they will think about the potential reward. So they've stolen something, but they've gained that object or that amount of money. But then they also will consider, what if I get caught? How much time will I have to spend in prison? And they have a balancing act. They figure out, okay, is that reward worth it? Like if I were to get caught, and they make a rational decision. So that's what control theory is. So moving on to what Carlen actually sort of found herself. So in Carlen's view, working class women have been controlled through the promise of rewards. So they make a class deal. So this is where she combines a bit of social class in with her feminist ideas. So she says that this class deal is the idea that society, at least, will offer respectable working class women consumer goods, so stuff, in return for a wage. Okay, so they work and they can buy stuff. But they also make a gender deal, and this is where it becomes a bit more feminist. Okay, they make a gender deal for the psychological and material rewards offered by male breadwinners in return for their love and domestic labor. So the idea that they trade off sort of being a housewife, doing sort of stuff around the house, and also sort of loving their partner, in return for psychological and material rewards. Now, the psychological rewards are literally like sort of companionship and sort of just keeping people on a level sort of basis in terms of their psyche. but also material rewards. So the husband sort of buying them things and doing nice things for them. Now, Carlin basically found that when these rewards, so both the class and the gender deal, when these rewards are not made available or prove to be sort of fiction, if they're not actually ever given to them, then criminality becomes a viable alternative. So if their job isn't paying them enough and they can't buy the material goods, or if their husband isn't sort of giving them those psychological and material rewards for all the work they do in the home, then women will turn to crime. Okay, they make that rational decision. They control their own destiny and actually go ahead and commit crime because that is the only viable alternative. Now, oh, lights have gone out again. So, if women fail to find a legitimate way of earning a decent living, they're left powerless and they basically feel victimized by society. So, they will commit crime. Okay, now it's worth noting that some of the women had always been in poverty and they felt like they had nothing to lose by using crime to try and escape. Now, this is referring to the working class women in her sample. Now, that seems perfectly legitimate. If you've only ever known poverty, you've only known sort of low paying jobs and sort of not very good relationships in which to utilize the gender deal, then crime does become a legitimate option. Okay, now that's literally it. So when you're talking about this in an essay, you might talk about the class and gender deal and that those being and sort of those not being fulfilled as being a reason for women's crime. You will get questions about why do women commit crime, or so to what extent do men commit more crime than women, in which case Carlin is a great case study to prove that women do commit crime. Now, just in case anyone's wondering how to word all of this stuff, now you've got the class deal, the gender deal. Hopefully, those have made fairly sort of straightforward for you. Now, this bit I've done a bit differently. So, in your case study sheets, you won't have this box. So, in terms of a methods argument, okay, this is quite important. So, I'm not going to talk you through it because it is sort of research methods, really. But by all means, take this down somewhere, if not on your case study sheet, but on a page next to it, maybe. But you do need to know about this research method and sort of what's good and bad about it. Okay. And in terms of evaluation, for the actual theory itself. Now, one thing that Carlen does do, and I've already talked about this, is she provides a link between class and gender, which actually not many other sociologists do. So if they're a feminist, they focus on gender, typically. If they're a Marxist, they focus on class. There's not really many sociologists who sort of integrate both. So that's always a good thing. She does use practical research, although there are a few problems with it, which a lot of sociologists actually sort of don't do. And also, it builds on wider sociological ideas. So things like control theory. So I mentioned that before. That's not her idea. She's sort of using someone else's idea to sort of form her own. Now, in terms of what's negative, we've already talked about how it's an unrepresentative study because of the small sample size. But it's also quite deterministic. Okay. It assumes that women, working class women, are completely reliant on men. Now, we know in the modern era that that's not really very true. And it also assumes that the moment that women in those conventional relationships don't receive rewards, they're going to turn to crime. Now, that's not true. In most cases, if a husband isn't giving them sort of psychological material rewards or love or things like that, what are they going to do? They're not going to turn to crime. They're probably just going to get a divorce. That's the reasonable thing to do. So there is a bit of a problem with the theory. It assumes a few things about women turning to crime when actually that's not necessarily a reasonable thing to assume. Okay, and it is only based on women who have actually gone to prison. So it's worth remembering that actually the sample might be a little bit biased and might have misguided Carlen's theory a little bit. Okay, but that is Carlen. Hopefully that has made sense. It's a good theory. We're on to Heidenson next, so I'll see you then. Thank you very much for listening.